My mother-in-law humiliated me. Now she begs for forgiveness. My name is Daniel. I'm 33 years old, and I grew up surrounded by luxury, but I learned early on not to let money define who I am. My father was a visionary entrepreneur who taught me that true wealth lies not in what you have, but in how you treat others. I've always preferred to keep a low profile, dress simply, and talk little about my private life. I enjoy small pleasures, a modest cup of coffee, an honest conversation, a walk where no one recognizes me. Even though I could afford all the luxuries in the world, I chose to live with what's necessary and work for everything I have. This is the story of how someone judged me by what they saw on the surface, never imagining that behind that facade was a man who, though he inherited a fortune, chose to carve his own path with humility, vision, and far more capability than he seemed to have. I never thought I'd write this, not for lack of reason, but because I always believed the best revenge was indifference. But after everything I experienced, I realized some stories deserve to be told, if only so others can learn that appearances deceive, and underestimating someone based on what you think they are can be the biggest mistake of your life. Not everyone who dresses simply is poor. Not everyone who stays quiet is weak. Sometimes, the one who brags the least is the one who has the most to teach. I met Sophia 5 years ago. When she was 25 and I was 28, she was sweet, hardworking, and had a smile that could calm my toughest days. We met in a neighborhood cafe. She worked there as a barista, and I dressed in worn jeans and a plain t-shirt. Looked like just another guy. But the truth was different. I have a fortune inherited from my father, a business empire built on years of sacrifice in technology, real estate, and international logistics. I always admired his ability to remain humble despite everything he had, and I embraced that same lifestyle. No flashy cars, no expensive watches, no empty luxuries. I like to live simply, and that's how Sophia fell in love with me, for who I was, how I treated her, for the deep conversations, not for what I had in the bank. But her mother, Teresa, saw me very differently from the start. To her, anything that didn't fit her superficial idea of success, suits, expensive cars, recognizable surnames, wasn't good enough for her daughter. The irony is that Sophia lived a modest life, valued authenticity over material things, and worked humbly as a barista, but Teresa insisted on projecting her own frustrations and social standards onto her. From the moment she met me, she saw me as someone with no future, a burden Sophia shouldn't have to carry. She didn't know me, but she judged me anyway. And the worst part, she did it with a conviction that hurt even in silence. From the very first moment we met, she looked down on me. "You're my daughter's boyfriend," she asked, scanning me from head to toe like I was carrying a disease. She never shook my hand, always found ways, subtle or direct, to humiliate me, criticizing my clothes, my car, my career goals. The most absurd thing was that her daughter lived a very simple life, yet to Teresa, what I represented was unacceptable. She mockingly asked if I would ever quit my little side jobs and find something real, as if she knew anything about my actual life. She never asked about my family. Not once did she try to truly get to know me. I endured it, for Sophia, because I saw how much she suffered being caught between her mother and me, trying to bridge a gap between two worlds that would never connect. I tried to mediate more than once in front of her mother, especially when I saw Sophia uncomfortable or hurt by the things said about me. But I never played Teresa's game. I just smiled and moved on. Still, every word, every look of disdain, they piled up like stones at the bottom of a river. And one day, the river stopped flowing. Then we got engaged. When we announced the engagement, Teresa exploded. She said her daughter was ruining her life, that I was a freeloader, an opportunist, that all I wanted was to latch onto her family. She shouted it in front of everyone. I stayed silent. That was the last time I tried to handle things peacefully. The following week, I invited Teresa to a private dinner at an upscale restaurant. I told her I needed to talk, to clear the air. She reluctantly agreed. She arrived with her usual smug expression and venomous remarks ready. I dressed as I always do, nothing flashy. When we arrived, the restaurant manager greeted us personally and led us to the best table, reserved in advance. Teresa frowned, but that dinner was just the first step. A week later, I quietly launched a foundation to support single entrepreneurial mothers and guests who showed up asking for help, thinking no one would recognize her. Teresa, using a fake name, applying for funding for a home bakery business. She stood in line like everyone else, filled out forms, presented her case, and, one day, I summoned her to the main office. When she walked in and saw me sitting behind the desk, formally dressed, my name on a gold plaque, she froze. She didn't say a word. She stood there, hands trembling, staring at me like she still couldn't believe what she was seeing. I offered her a seat with the courtesy she always expected from me, but never believed I deserved. Would you like to continue your application, Mrs. Teresa? I asked her with a polite smile, without a hint of mockery. She lowered her gaze, mumbled something unintelligible, turned around, and left without picking up her documents. From that day on, she never spoke of it again, but she knew that I knew. She knew she had sunk to the level she once scorned, and that the same man she had humiliated was now the one deciding whether she deserved a second chance. I didn't reject her, but I didn't help her either. I filed her folder away like all the others, with no special priority. Because sometimes, true revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about holding up a mirror and letting them see who they've become. Sophia never knew what happened. I told her. Her mother had calmed down and things were better now. She smiled, relieved, as if she could finally breathe without the constant tension between us. I smiled too, knowing deep down that peace came from something deeper. Teresa had learned her lesson, not from what I said, but from what I showed her, that respect isn't demanded through shouting, it's earned through actions. Sometimes, justice doesn't make a grand entrance, it just happens. I didn't drag her down, didn't expose her, didn't humiliate her. I simply let her see who I really was, and who she had been to me. Since then, everything changed. Teresa softened her tone, dropped the arrogance, and her attitude became more measured, almost humble. And deep down, I knew that chapter was finally closed, not with hatred, but with silent justice, the kind that doesn't need witnesses to feel complete.